was like, yeah, that sounds exactly like what I want to do. And I was like, nah, nah, girl, you're wrong. Done.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Welcome to another podcast episode, and it is an exciting one because we do have a finished object. Kind of. Well, no, it is finished. However, it's been heavily modified in order to get it done for the Thanksgiving deadline, which, by the way, happy Thanksgiving. By the time this goes up, we will have been past the holiday, so I hope you guys had a great time. Hope you were able to spend it with family, friends, loved ones, and maybe even sneak in some knitting time. So happy Thanksgiving. We are officially on our way to Christmas, friends. So I'm very excited for that. If you've been here before, then you know I have been knitting the So Frill blouse by Nadine Joerg-Falvel of Madame Falvel Knits. And I selected this pattern to use as a frame of reference, basically, for the vest option that I was really more interested in knitting. And then basically just made so many changes from there. At this point, it's like almost unrecognizable to the pattern. But that being said, I love it. So let's start with, first of all, the yarn. This sweater was made using the Packapeds sock yarn and their colorway Harvest. And I actually purchased 3 skeins of this yarn at the thrift store for $1 a piece. And the colorway that this yarn has is actually a self-striping orange and green yarn. So in the project photos that I was able to find using this yarn on Ravelry, there was a lot of funky stuff going on, which I think is a great tip if you are planning to use something like a sock yarn or a variegated yarn that you're not exactly sure how it's going to work up. I definitely recommend just searching the yarn in Ravelry, and once you've found it, you can actually select the specific colorway and then find projects that have been made out of that yarn. And that gave me so much information for how I was going to have to navigate managing the yarn. And being that I was going to be working this vest, I decided that the color changes that were happening were a little bit too intense for me personally. So I chose to pair my yarn with a strand of Drops Kid Silk Mohair in the colorway Chocolate. And so I had this brown mohair kind of counteracting the oranges and greens that were happening in the Packapeds yarn. And I really do think that the outcome is exactly what I was hoping it would be, that chocolate would just sort of mute and dilute a little bit of the intense color contrast from the Packapeds Harvest. So that's a really good tip, I think, if you have a yarn in your stash that maybe is more variegated or even just a little brighter than what you're comfortable wearing or maybe thought when you purchased it, find yourself a mohair that's gonna just kind of tone it down a little bit. I think if you go with something darker, something more neutral, you can always play around with going opposite on the color chart and pairing those colors together to cancel each other out a little bit. So I would definitely recommend playing around with different colors of mohair, with different colors of variegated yarn. This is not the last time I'm going to be playing around with this because honestly, I think it's the perfect way to customize your yarn if you're not a yarn dyer yourself. So love the yarn combination. That being said, I didn't even use 2 skeins of the Packapeds. And this shocked me a little bit because I did definitely make my vest a little bit wider, a little more, it's not necessarily oversized for me personally. This is the fit that I would consider, this is like fitted. This is a fitted vest to me. But I did crop it a little bit. I know that I didn't eat up too much yarn for those reasons, but I actually was surprised that I was able to get a full vest out of 2 skeins of fingering weight yarn. That was pretty impressive for my size. This is all of the yarn that I have left over. I wound up using 2 balls of the mohair. I have to double check that. Now I can't remember if I used a full one first. But no, I think I only ever had 2 balls of the mohair. And then I have so much left from my second skein of the Pack-a-Ped. So let's see. Of the Pack-a-Ped's yarn, I have 17 grams left over from my second skein. So I used 1 skein in its entirety. And the second skein, I used about 80 grams of a little bit more. And I didn't even touch the third skein. And that's only problematic because when I was trying to figure out how to manage the yarn, if you saw that podcast episode where I went into detail about how I broke it all up and then did my knitting flat while alternating rounds or while alternating yarns, as well as my helical knitting, you will have seen that I cut all 3 skeins of yarn in half and then kind of swap them all up. So I now have 20 grams from 1 skein. I don't even know which one this is from. And then 2 halves from other skeins. So I'm assuming that none of them actually go together, and that's fine. I'll just have to make sure if I use that yarn in the future that I continue to do the helical knitting or alternating skeins with it. So not a ton of yarn used here. If I'm right in saying that I did only ever bust out 2 balls of the chocolate, which while I'm editing this, I will double check. I think that I originally had purchased 4 balls of the chocolate, assuming I would have left over. But from what I had working here, there's about 7 grams left. It did not use a ton of yarn. And the pattern, I actually went into it not knowing how much yarn I was going to use. So we can kind of segue now into how I modified the pattern. But one of the things I knew I was going to do right off the bat was not knit the sleeves that this blouse has. And so I actually didn't know what the yarn requirements would be, since it doesn't tell you how much yarn you need just to knit the body. That makes sense. So I was kind of gambling a little bit with how much yarn I would need, and of course assumed I would have too much rather than too little, and boy did I. So that was the first thing. If you are planning to knit this pattern as a vest, I will make sure that in my Ravelry page, I do list exactly how much yarn I used, and that will be for knitting with all of the modifications that I did, but also off the charts of the sizing because I made mine bigger. So let's go into modifications. First thing, you may have already noticed that in my attempt to get this done before Thanksgiving, I was already just thinking ahead of, all right, how can I make my life a little bit easier? And the first thing that I did was omit the cabling ribbing that the pattern includes. And instead, I did a few inches of ribbing and a split hem on the sides. The back is maybe a row or two, maybe a couple of rows longer than the front is, but they are pretty much the same length. And so, yeah, I did the split hem with the few inches of ribbing at the hem, as well as I omitted one of the ruffles. So let's get into ruffles. Okay, no. Let's talk about where we left off last time. I was talking about how I was trying to come up with a way I could remedy the gaping armhole that I had. And then I got the shirt that I wound up going with. I decided not to go with the one with the bow, but this is one of the shirts that I ordered on Amazon that I had shown last week. It just has a simple V-neck. It's a button-up. It's a great little shirt. So when I tried the vest on over the shirt, I actually found that the armhole depth wasn't quite as crazy as I thought it was. Nothing would be worse than it being too tight and then really bunching up the arm of this shirt. And because of the sort of ease in this shirt arm, I did need a little bit more of an armhole than I thought I would. So it wound up working to my advantage that I was working with too stretched out an armhole. And I was reading through all of your comments, which, by the way, thank you so much, because I really did wait to see if anyone could point me in the right direction. I didn't know what I was going to do to finish off the armhole so it wasn't just a raw edge, but also to cinch things in a little bit. So I was toying back and forth with all of the options that I had. And then someone said, why don't you just do a slip stitch with crochet and it'll stabilize it, it'll draw it in a little bit. I was like, yeah, that sounds exactly like what I want to do, because I was already kind of getting over this activity. I was kind of over knitting this. I don't know what it was by the end of it. I felt like I did all of the fun stuff, and then everything else, I think it was the ribbing. It's the ribbing that gets me every time, but I do like the look of it so much. So I was ready to wrap this project up. So I said, and I figured too, well, let me just go in and do the slip stitch with a crochet hook around the armhole, because if I don't like it, I can really quickly tear that out too. And I'm pretty lickety split with a crochet hook. So I went around and did that. And so this didn't finish the hem necessarily. It just really did give a nice stabilization to the armhole. And what I liked about the slip stitch is that it does sort of mimic your standard bind off, which you do see on the little button placket here. So I like that sort of finish it in. It also, because it did cinch things up, it almost caused the armholes to turn in on themselves. So I thought by then, I was like, you know what? Done. That's the armhole. Moving on to the next thing. And that was then when I picked up for one of my ruffles. Now, I said in the last video that I wasn't even concerned about the armholes and the ruffles, because I could just do that all the day before Thanksgiving if I needed to. And someone commented and said, I wouldn't be too sure about that. Those things are going to wind up taking a lot more time than you think. And I was like, nah, nah, girl, you're wrong. Now, I did knit this bigger, both in width and in armhole depth, than the original pattern called for, and even the largest size. So I read the numbers that it said to pick up for your little ruffly friends here, and realized pretty quickly that that was not going to be the amount that I needed, because in order for my ruffle to actually come under my arm like it's supposed to, I added so much depth in the yoke, I was going to need to pick up way more. In the end, the amount of stitches that these ruffles are made out of are almost 250 a piece. And it's in twisted rib. Each one of these took me well over 2 hours. And not fun 2 hours. The stitches are so crammed because to make the ruffles ruffly, you just have like a ton of stitches isolated in one space. And so there's nowhere for them to go on your needles. There's no real way to keep them kind of spread out, because at the end of the day, they're only spanning this distance. So even though you have an abundance more of stitches on the needles, it's only taking up the amount of space that the armhole is. So on your needles are overcrowded with stitches. And with the mohair and the fingering and the twisted rib, I was like cursing the whole time. I hated knitting the frills. Hated it. And it was immediate. I was like, I'm not doing that second frill. I was like, we do not need it. I said, okay, if I try this on with the individual frills done and look in the mirror and think, ooh, it's really missing something, I'll go back and do them. But otherwise, if I look in the mirror and say that got the point across, that was where I was leaving it. And I did. I looked in the mirror and I thought, that's a ruffle. I get it. You could see that it's a frill. We got the frill. That's enough. I can't say that next year I won't go back and add the second frill. And I think if I went into it knowing I was only going to do the one frill, I would have made them a little more dramatic. I could have done with a more dramatic frill. So those are the things. Oh, if things just changed a little bit, I literally just had a moment of panic because there's usually like a meter on the camera where I could see that the microphone is picking me up and it's not going. So I just had to double check and make sure that I was actually recording audio that whole time, and I was. Okay. So where was I? I think I was just talking about the fact that, yeah, I could have done with a little bit more of a dramatic ruffle had I gone into it thinking that I was only going to do the one, but there's nothing stopping me from just at a later time going back and picking up another ruffle. I just didn't like the experience, and because I was trying to get it done in such a short amount of time, I was like, less stress. No one cares if you have one ruffle or two. No one's going to know the difference. And at the end of the day, if this is what is going to make you happy, then all is good. So overall, the modifications that I made were to deepen the yoke, widen the body. I nixed the cable ribbing on the body and never did decreases to make it fitted. I added a split hem and I only did one ruffle. So really the only part of this pattern that is even part of the pattern was like the cast on. And for that, I did follow the largest size. I also didn't go into the process knowing that I was going to. I thought that the largest size would have been perfect to accommodate my body, but when I got to the point where it said to connect under the arms, I doubted it. Now, I do think that if I were planning to wear this as a blouse, the largest size would have been good. But for the fit that I was going for, I did feel like I had to continue. And it was not difficult to modify that part. I just continued with the increases in pattern until I was happy with the yoke depth as well as the width, wrote that number down, and then those were the new numbers I was working with. So if you are planning to knit this pattern and you don't fall into the kind of limited size range that it comes in, I do feel pretty confident that if you are an adventurous knitter, that you would be really fine to adapt this pattern to the way that you want it to fit. So I would not be too concerned if you're not falling into that size range. If you want to go ahead and play with the numbers, I do think it's easy enough to do because at the end of the day, this all isn't really changing. It's just the increasing. And Nadine Joerick-Falvel on Madame Falvel Knits on Instagram, she has announced that she's working on adding to her size range. So I'm sure in future patterns, we are going to see a little bit broader of a size range, but for this one, it is limited. But I have full faith in you that if you want to knit this and you're not falling into that bracket, you can make this happen for yourself. So those are the modifications that I made. I think I got everything there. Everything feels great. That was the thing. I was so eager to block this, you guys. I totally forgot to do my before and after blocking video, which I really want to make sure that I do because I think it's so helpful for both you and I to see how things really do transform from before to after blocking. So I apologize. I dropped the ball there. But I'm already making mental notes to make sure that I continue to do that because that's something that I really like to see and I know you do too. So I apologize on this one. I forgot to get that before blocking video. I mean, really the only difference was because I also did steam the top half before I decided to, while I was making all the changes that I was. So it was already kind of half blocked anyway, and I did only steam block this because I didn't have time for this to dry. And honestly, the steam blocking worked out so nicely on the top half. I just felt like it would be fine for the bottom half, and it totally opened up the ribbing, all of that. It will need a good wash and all of that, but after the holiday, I will get around to doing that. And yeah, I think that was about everything that I wanted to say. The fabric is really beautiful. This pack of Peds does have alpaca content in it, so it does have just a really nice kind of movement and drape to it. It's really warm when I put it on, so it's a pretty cozy sweater vest. And honestly, it's exactly what I pictured. So I do really love it. And I feel like I went into this pattern knowing that I was just gonna play around and work towards getting the fit and the look that I wanted, and I got there by myself, and that feels really good too. So this is your encouragement to, if there's a pattern that you're eyeing and you're nervous because you feel like you're gonna have to make modifications, I say go for it. Have fun as long as you go in with the mentality that things might not turn out the way that you want them to the first time. And you are prepared to make the choices and decisions along the way and not just blindly follow a pattern. I think that you would have fun doing that because I know I did. And look at my great little vest I got out of the situation. So that is my so-so frill blouse sort of kind of vest, heavily modified thing. And this project took me a total of 16 days to knit. I'm pretty impressed with myself on that one. I did not expect that to happen. So 16 days of pretty much undivided attention going towards this, and we have a finished object. I am going to try and sit down one day and just get all of my notes into Ravelry so that you have them for all of these patterns that I've been modifying, because I know that that's helpful for you too. But that's the So-So Frill blouse. Totally love it. Now, I'm going to just go ahead and say it. There was no basket weave a day happening on the Corsavin cardigan. I'm not even going to show it right now because I was just too focused on getting this done. And now that can get back into basket weave a day or something along those lines. It's just one of those slow but steady projects. So let's just not even worry about our Corsavin and let's jump into the Christmas dress. So this didn't get a ton of love this week because I have been, of course, really worried about getting this done. However, this will now have my undivided attention until December 24th. So because I was thinking about it too, and I really would love to get some photos of it before Christmas. So really, I would like to get this done probably in the days leading up to Christmas. So hopefully we'll have time to get some really cute pictures in it. At this point, it's been on the needles for 9 days and I haven't been working on it really much at all, just when I have a moment or two here and there to get some stockinette in the round done because the bust is stockinette. I didn't mention the pattern yet. This is the Augustins number 25 by Sophie Velling, and I am knitting this. I'm calling it my Christmas dress. So the bust part is stockinette in the round, and this is the part that I am modifying for my dress because the pattern suggests that this sort of stockinette strip almost, it's just a little bit more a little shorter than I want. I would like for the stockinette portion to cover my full bust, and then at my sort of under bust empire waistline, that's when I'm going to branch off into the skirt portion. So I am through the first half of the bust. It is a double folded bit of fabric, so it's taking me a little bit longer than I thought it would just because it is stockinette, but I really haven't put a lot of time towards it. And it seems like I am about a third of the way done with the second half of the fold. So I have knit the sort of full width. This is like the height of it, but I feel like I'm just referencing it as the width because it is the width of like what I'm looking for on the top. So this is the fold line where it's going to be a double layered fabric, and I'm not entirely sure. This construction is so interesting. It's not really what I expected it to be, but fun, all good. Nothing crazy is happening. Just I I just didn't realize that it was going to be constructed the way that it is. So I am just working my way through that second half of the double layer of fabric. And I definitely think that in the next couple days, I'll for sure have that done, if not tonight. And then I'll be able to move on to, I don't know if it goes into the sleeves or the skirt, but I want to move on to the skirt first. So I'm pretty excited to get to that. The fabric that I'm getting using the yarns that I'm using, which I'm using Drops Fabelle and Drops Brushed Alpaca Silk. Brushed Alpaca. You guys like her, huh? Just brushing her hair. I just thought it was funny. The fabric that I'm getting is really dense. I am knitting this on 4mm needles, and in my swatch that felt right. I think in hindsight, I probably should have done something more like a 4.5 because the fabric is pretty dense. Now I did want a more dense fabric because this is the main structure holding up the skirt. So I wanted something strong and sturdy, but knitting it's just barely uncomfortable because of how dense it is. I'm not worried about it because it's really only in these little detail parts. And if I'm finding it still uncomfortable later on for the sleeves, or I think it's the hem, I don't know, there's another part that uses the smaller needles, I'm just going to switch over to the 4.5s and make that work. So yeah, this is just stocking it in the round right now. I guess once I've finished the double fold part, I'll try it on and just make sure everything's fitting in the bust the way that I'm hoping it will. This is another pattern that my gauge is off, and so I am adapting things a lot. But that's okay. I already did all the math, so I should now be able to follow the pattern. I'm following the pattern in sizes that sort of match up with the percentage of my gauge. And so all of that math is done. I am just following the pattern for the rest of it. Other than that, I'm so glad that you guys enjoyed. On the last video, I included a clip. I was saying how the red Drops Brushed Alpaca Silk, the texture of it is so interesting. And I was comparing it to the mohair because I was working with a Drops Kid Silk mohair on my Thanksgiving vest. And this has such a beautiful softness, and the fibers are so long as a mohair typically is. But the brushed alpaca silk, it has more of a compressed and compact quality to it in the actual fibers, where I thought that the brushed alpaca silk fibers were going to be a little bit more fanned out. And so I included that photo so that you guys could see what I was talking about, comparing the kid silk to the red brushed alpaca. And I'm noting the fact that it's red because I mentioned there that I swore I felt this in a different color and it was softer. And I brought that one out for you guys to see today. So this is the same exact yarn in a different colorway. I don't know what happened to the label on this one. These have both been stored in the same place in the same way for the same amount of time. I bought them in one bulk order that I made over the summer. I've talked about that before. And it is so interesting. I'm going to take another close-up photo of this so I can show you on screen now. But even just in the ball, I can tell that the gray is way more fluffy, whereas the red is so dense, almost like I was like sitting on this. And like I said, these have been stored in the same place in the same exact way. This was not underneath a pile of books or anything, but that's sort of the vibe that it has sitting here right now. And even looking at this with the light behind it, I can see that the fibers are almost matted, whereas on this one, they are doing that really fluffy, fun alpaca thing. So as a hairstylist, my intuition tells me that the dye that's used to make the red one red is changing the texture of the actual fiber along the way. If you didn't know this, when you add a darker color to your hair, when you get your hair colored darker, the color itself is actually penetrating the cuticle of your hair and causing it to sort of plump up. And it can change the texture of your hair, where some people will even say that if they have really thin and fine hair strands, they will color their hair darker because of the additional texture and volume that it gives them. So I feel kind of like this one may be over dyed in a way where the pigment and the color is just crushing the fibers. And someone mentioned that they thought it might have even been burned in the process of dyeing. It's interesting. I'm going to continue using it. I will say, however, if I knew that before I made this order or before I even just like saw the difference here, I might have gone with the mohair instead because in the fabric, the way that that sort of crushed and compacted texture, the way that that plays out in the fabric is not some sort of fuzzy fabric like this is, where you see that halo, or like this would be knit up where I can see the halo around it. This is just like a little dense carpet. It's not the texture that I would have chose if I knew ahead of time, and I didn't even realize that there was something up with this yarn until I literally took that photo. So, you let me know, you let others know in the comments when you have purchased drops brushed alpaca silk in a dyed colorway, specifically a saturated dyed colorway. Have you noticed that the texture is more similar to my red strand versus a more neutral color or even a lighter pigment, maybe a blushy pink, a color like that? Has that looked more like my gray strand? I'm so curious to know, did I get a bad batch, or is this what you should expect from the Drops Brushed Alpaca Silk? I think it's really important to know that going into it, because as of right now, I would not feel comfortable recommending this yarn to someone else. However, I would have if I had just seen the way that it was in the gray ball first. So this is all just something I'm figuring out and learning as I go. I just want to make sure that I let you know that. So that's that on the yarn. That's where we're at on the progress of this piece. I was literally just about to say something else and it completely left my brain. Oh, like what the heck? It took a full ball of the brushed alpaca silk to do one half of the bust, so the first layer. So I'm assuming it's going to take a second ball to do the second layer. I'm gonna double check how much of this I got and we'll see. Are we playing yarn chicken? I thought that I got a little extra, but of course with my gauge issues and all of the sizing and everything, I know that it's not I know it's not predictable really how much yarn I'm going to be using. So that's of no fault to the pattern. If I do run out of yarn, that's completely because I've made my own adaptations here. So yeah, as of right now, I feel like if each, what is that? 6, 7, 8 inches is going to use a full ball of the brushed alpaca silk, and that's in the 4mm stockinette portion. Who knows how much it's going to take to get through the skirt. So I'm going to try and keep an eye on it as I go. If I do feel like I need to order more yarn, then hopefully I can get ahead of that, or we're going to just make adjustments in the length. This whole thing is a big question mark because I genuinely have no idea how far I will get before Christmas, but I'm hoping so much that I can get the whole thing done. However, I have already set up my expectations so that if I only get to a short length dress, I can wear it that way for Christmas and then finish it up into the full length that I want it to be for Valentine's Day. So those are the the things that I'm not really sure where we're gonna get, but I would prefer personally for it to be the full long dress for Christmas. And I'm sure if anything, my boyfriend would prefer if after Christmas I would just rip back a little bit and get that short dress for Valentine's Day. So that's where we're at with this project. And actually, while I have this in my hands, I have some acquisitions in the way of some happy mail that I received this week. So the first thing that you may have already noticed is these little stitch markers. I'm so excited about them. If you had seen my Rhinebeck Ramble podcast, I talked about how I went to the sort of Road to Rhinebeck welcome event at Pick Up Every Stitch in Mount Kisco, New York, and I met Jonna and Kim of Knit Together with Kim and Jonna. And they welcomed me in such a warm way. They were the highlight of that weekend for me, was meeting them, was meeting Casey from Young Folk Knits. And So since then, I've been chatting back and forth a little bit with Jana, who is just the nicest, most kind person. And she reached out and asked if she could send me a little something. And I was like, what does she want to send me? But I said, sure. She sent me the cutest little package. She saw that I said in my Rhinebeck video that all I was looking for was a little tape measure and some little stitch stoppers. And she so generously sent me a couple. So these little gnomes are actually my very first stitch stoppers, the cute ones. I had like two very functional ones, but I actually shoved my needle all the way through them. So we're not counting those. I've never had cute ones. And I put them right away onto my Christmas dress to get me in the spirit. And she also so generously sent me a little retractable tape measure from Pick Up Every Stitch. And it's perfect. I was actually about to just take it out and measure where I'm at because finally I have something that I can stash into my bag. The tape measure, I've had two tape measures that I've been using. One of them is a literal carpenter's tape measure that I usually keep in my car. And I took it out because it's a mini one. I took it out and I've had it in my knitting bag. And that's literally been busting out my little Stanley tape measure to measure things. And then when I've needed to do more body measurements, I have an old sewing tape measure that is I cut it. At one point I was cutting fabric and it's like taped back together, so it's so janky. And I hate that one because once it's unraveled, you have to ravel it back up. So she sent me a little retractable one and it's from Pick Up Every Stitch. Now I just think of like that was the highlight of that weekend. So thank you, Jana. I am so appreciative. And I had one of you send me something. I'm like getting all red, right? Whew. This is so sweet, you guys. So a little while back, Chelsea of Backyard Eclectic Fibers reached out to me and asked if she could send me some of her hand-dyed yarn. And I was like, sure, go ahead, girl. And she was so sweet. She's like, if you don't like the colorway, you could use it in a giveaway. I was like, all right, send it on over. Let's see what happens. Now, I actually opened this package kind of fully expecting to assume that this yarn would be for a giveaway. And I'm so sorry it's not because I fell in love with it. Like a deep emotional connection I now have to this yarn. First of all, I open up this package and these aromas are just coming out. It smells so good. There's a little handmade bar of soap in there and a little stitch marker, which by the way, for Stitch or Project Keeper, they're called. Yeah, I'm new here. New to the Project Keeper game. I got a Project Keeper. It's my first one. Oh, I put it on here. Hang on. I just threw it on because it was red. It doesn't go with my festivity at all. But it's a little apple Project Keeper. That's why I put it on here. Oh my gosh, you guys. I'm so scattered today. I literally put it on because I thought I could be one of these real podcasters who puts a Project Keeper on when they're podcasting so I could show you the progress I made next week. All right, I'm going to move my little apple now. Look at us go. We're real podcasters. Okay. Now I have an apple, and you'll have to remind me to actually remember to move that every week. So the little apple was in there. Also, I know I'm leaving you hanging on the actual yarn because it's that good. There was this candle, and I haven't burned it yet because I've just been waiting to show it to you. But when I tell you, this is going to be all I have burning until it's gone. This is an apple pie hand poured candle. Chelsea, did you do these yourself too? How can I explain this? It's an apple pie scent. However, it doesn't have that overly sweet scent, and it's also not so intensely cinnamon. There's a freshness about it too. This is my favorite type of fall scent. I used to have a pumpkin spice type candle and it was my favorite. And when it burnt out, I've never found one that was as just like warm and cozy as that. And this one is, and I actually love these little tiny jar candles because the big ones overwhelm me. So this is perfect. And I adore this candle. So this was a highlight. And now for the yarn. When I tell you that I'm kind of picky, I've discovered, about colors and exactly what I like. And this girl nailed my color story of a life. So much so that, like, I've just left this out since I opened the package so that I could admire it when I walk past it. Look at this yarn. Now, you're not going to appreciate it from here. I will have to do some close-ups. But it's called Apple Harvest, and it has the most beautiful pinky reds in it into peaches, but then it comes into these sort of, if you know my Minto sweater, that sort of mustard, there's hints of that as it turns into, I see these little like olive green speckles. This is my color. And this might just have to turn into a muscle burrow hat. Maybe before the others. I don't know. It took all of the self-control to not literally whip it out of its skein and ball it up that night. I just had to show it to you guys on here because this is stunning. And the texture of this is a sock yarn. It's 75% superwash wool, 25% nylon, 100 grams gets you 400 meters. And this is soft and sturdy. Chelsea didn't, by the way, she didn't actually even ask me to talk about these things. I'm choosing to because I'm obsessed with this color. And I think that it's difficult for me to find a color I like. I mean, guys, I went to a Rhinebeck and didn't come back with a single thing. This color is just perfection. I don't know. I'm obsessed with it. I can't wait to see how it's going to work up. I thought maybe I would ask you before I just dive in and make myself a muscle burrow because I said I was going to do all of the other muscle burrows. I thought I would ask your opinion on what you think I should make out of this. What I will tell you is I think it could be fun if I incorporate the leftovers that I have from my Like pullover. I also have a olive green yarn somewhere in my stash that I think could just pull from these little speckles in the most delectable way. So I thought I'd get your opinion too, but it just took all the self-control to not bust into this. And really, I feel like a special lucky girl. So thank you, Chelsea, for making me feel that way. Thank you, Jana, for being so kind and also giving me my warm and fuzzies. And yeah, I'm just feeling particularly loved. That being said, too, if you haven't noticed, which a lot of you have, you've been reaching out and it's just cool, you guys. We hit 5,000 subscribers and you guys have been asking me so many questions and it's so funny, and I am considering doing a Q&A or something either later in the holidays or maybe in the new year. But what I want you to know more than anything is that when I sat down to do the first podcast, I had no idea what this would turn into. And it's given me just that additional layer on the craft to look forward to. And I think it was the missing piece from going from loving knitting and enjoying it as a hobby to being fully immersed in just enjoying and adoring the craft. And that's because of you. So thank you. And I don't like to get too mushy, but you guys know I can't go without saying how much it means to me that you're here, that you're in the comments, that you chat with me and we talk about our crafts and all of the things like that. I just appreciate you. So, with that being said, let us talk a little bit about the plans for the next week. If you haven't seen already, there was a new video that went up earlier this week. If you are looking for some gift ideas for other knitters in your life or some things to add onto your wish list, if you want to send a video on off to the person who's shopping for you, then I highly recommend checking out my gift guide for the knitter. I promise you that there's at least one thing on that list that you did not think you needed. And you need it. So if you want to take advantage of the sort of Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend that is happening now, I definitely recommend checking out that video, and all of the links that I talk about are in the description, and I do link to specific products. I didn't just generalize topics. There are specific products that I am recommending in that video, so it's a really quick and easy way if you're looking for wish list items. And then other than that, we do have, I'm hoping to get another video out next week. We'll see with the holiday and everything. It's a little tricky, but I am enjoying bringing you the diverse selection of videos. That being said, too, I have about a million ideas for other videos. So what would really help me out to narrow my list down to what you guys actually want to see is by you letting me know what you want to see. If you could let me know down below what videos in particular you are hoping for from me, I can at least sort down my list and grab those ones that you want to see first, because I have too many ideas. So let me know what you guys are thinking, and we can come together and get both of us something that we're going to really enjoy. Other than that, it is all about the Christmas dress for the next month, kind of. Since my goal is to have no more than 3 projects on the needles at any given time. I have Corsavin and the Christmas dress. However, I don't have anything that's just good old stocking it in the round. So I am hoping to get something like that on my needles just to have on the side. But that is all I have planned. That is all I have for you here today. So big ol' thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and like this kind of content, I would super appreciate it if you would give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, ring the bell, all those things that YouTube really likes. And that's kind of all I've got. All right, you guys, I'll see you on the next one. Bye!